Welcome everybody to another EQAFE Google Hangout. Tonight we will be discussing the EQAFE Hangout, Eternal Self-Discovery with Jack from the Journeys in the Afterlife series. Now these series are from EQAFE.com. It's a website with, it's basically a library of information on all sorts of different topics in everyday life, human experiences and things like that. So basically anything that you can come up with, you can search it in this EQAFE.com, and I'm sure some kind of interviews will come up to listen to. I also, in these Hangouts, in the description, place a little link for you to check out to see more of what EQAFE is about. So you can check that out as well if you're not familiar with it. And this is all in relation to Walking Process, the Destiny Eye process, which is another website, destiny.org, where my guest and I have been walking this process for many years. So this EQAFE is kind of the educational material to this Destiny Eye process. So it kind of goes hand in hand. So let me just, without further ado, introduce my guest, Kim Klein, or Kim Doubt from, she's living in South Africa now on the Destiny Farm, and she's from Canada. Hi, Kim. Thanks for being here.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So let's just get into this interview. So Jack is, it says, Eternal Self-Discovery with Jack. Jack is a being that comes through, the portal is the source of all these interviews. She is Sunet's spy. She's, just her thing is being the portal, which is basically any being in this existence can come through her and speak. Everything has a life force, so that part of ourselves is aware, is alive always, and that is what she accesses. Again, I'll put links below so you can learn more about who she is.
It's like how to explain the portal in 30 seconds. Good job. Good.
I do my best here. But yeah, so I've also did an interview or a hangout with the portal, and she's got series and stuff on EQAFE, so there's plenty of material for you to check out and educate yourself, because it is fascinating and very supportive. And me and Kim are just going to discuss the interview and some of our points that we've walked in our Destiny Eye process type path to kind of explain and share and show some of what we do within this process and how EQAFE has supported us. And specifically, we're using this Eternal Self-Discovery with Jack interview as a base to kind of speak from. So Kim, let's just start with your perspective or insight on the interview in general. How did you experience it?
Okay, so for this particular interview, it was a more expansive one. The points that stuck out for me were when Jack was walking a process of becoming one and equal to the physical, which he had compared himself to as like infinitesimally inferior, eventually is what he came to. And then how it was like his self-definition that was limiting him to be able to stand equal and one to something as integral as the physical. And when I look at, like, you know, the physical and what it is and why it's this amazing, fantastic, expansive thing, it's like it opened my eyes to that more so, because you know, we all have a body and it carries us around, but oftentimes we view it as like this vessel that we can do anything we want to and not really think about it. It just kind of does its thing. But really, the integrity of the physical and how it strives to attain its utmost potential despite what we do to it or how we treat it, how we neglect it, how we disregard and do not honor it. It will still function to its utmost. It will never, you know, be spiteful or have these reactions that we actually exist in most of the time. I mean, not just spite, but reactions, judgments, emotions, feelings. We're flighty, and the physical is just substantial and stands regardless. And So that's kind of the point he was looking at in, you know, my self-definition. I can fit it in my hands basically, but the physical is like life itself. You know, it is just interconnected, and you know, you die, your body goes back to the earth, transforms, and becomes something new. I mean, that's incredible. You know, so for me, the point that stuck out in terms of having your self-definition limit your ability to expand and grow was something I can really relate to. And also walking a process of facing small points like Jack with the atom, to then working my way up to facing bigger points that I never thought I would be able to face and walk through, like Jack integrating with the physical more wholly, one and equal to it.
Cool. Yeah, that's something we're going to touch on in this hangout to come. But I just wanted to go back to the physical point. And what struck me in this interview that he talked about was mostly, like, when we look at the physical body, we just think of it as like the skin and the skeleton and the organs inside, and that's basically it. Like, you take the organs out and it's hollow inside. But something that is touched upon so much in EQAFE in this process through your mind and things like that is it's actually like a depth that you're creating within yourself. Like you're going inside yourself, and it's like this eternal point of depth that actually exists within us, that it's like, you know, it's here always, but we're not accessing that depth because we're constantly believing that we're not, you know, able to be that. Like, we can't be one and equal to the physical because we're whatever we think we are. So that's basically a point of this process that we're walking through, is realizing the depths of who we are as life, as the physical. Because the physical is not just this layer of physical reality, it's also a depth as well. And that depth each one in this existence has. So yeah, that's what kind of and we ever could imagine. Or
yeah, and it even stands as an example of what we could be if you think about the physical and the fact that one atom stands alone, but it works in conjunction with every other atom in the body together to create something bigger than itself. I mean, imagine humanity could cooperate in such a way. So
yeah, that's totally a cool point.
Yeah,
cool example as well. Yeah, it's like, you know, just our hand alone, the muscles in it, or our heart is, you know, even the cells are all together creating this hand here. And, you know, I was thinking that also, like, if they were like humans and one just kind of said, no, I'm not going to do this today, I'm tired, and they just stopped, and then your hand gets on a step. So, yeah, it's very cool. Nature is cool, you know.
Yeah. It's okay. I just wanted, because you said something that reminded me of something in the interview that was talking about how in order to get to know, for example, one atom, or you know, the analogy of one person, it's like you can't judge it, you can't have any kind of emotion or feeling towards it if you want to really get to know it. You just have to really integrate it completely, in that one atom it's a physical structure, but it also works in an environment, and it also has a history. Just like a person, I mean, they are a physical body, and then they have a lifetime of experience, and then they also grew up in a culture and in a family and in a country, and all of that is going to influence who they are. So if you really want to get to know a person, you really have to open your arms and drop everything of your own kind of self-beliefs and or projecting outwards judgments and whatnot. Drop it all to be able to embrace them completely and get to know their culture, so you can see how that influenced them to be who they are. Get to know how their relationship with their body, with their family, with their culture. And only then can you really say that you know the person, you know? And that's quite a process to walk with somebody, because that will take time to establish that kind of depth of relationship where you just unconditionally embrace and learn and understand them and who they are in order to be able to stand equal to them through learning about them, learning from them, because it reminded me of school, where it's like you will judge people based on appearance, hobbies, who they hang out with, and resist actually moving towards getting to know these people because you have this self-definition and then this judgment about them. And you will stay in your comfort zone and your comfort group, never really pushing that and seeing who you are beyond that. And I actually had that experience where, you know, I wouldn't actually in school get to know certain people because of one of these reasons. And when I did, I got to know, you know, I pushed through that and stopped the judgment and actually opened myself up and got to know these people that turned out to be amazing people that, in fact, some of them, I would say actually all of them, I learned something from, where they had a quality or a skill or something about them that far exceeded anything that I had been able to do in some way or another. And it's like you almost want to go into this defensiveness because like you had judged them as this way or that, thought that you placed them in this neat category, when in fact, you know, they are standing as something, in fact, better than you yourself are. And you can either look to that and learn from it, understand it, and see how you can then develop that in yourself, or you can resist it and deny it and cut yourself off and really limit yourself. I mean, the name of the interview is Eternal Self-Discovery, because literally every single person that we meet, and specifically the ones that we resist and have reactions towards, will teach us something about ourselves. And if you embrace it, it's oftentimes a lesson that shows you that you are in fact greater than you ever thought you could be, because you're willing to take on this learning and this self-development, overcome all these things that have been limiting you, only to expand yourself even more. And that can go on forever.
Yeah. And it's so enjoyable as well. Are you on? Can you mute yourself, because it's like a kickback. Cool. You good? Okay. What I was going to share was, yeah, it's also so enjoyable to be able to, like, once you get through that point of resistance or limitation that you've, say, a judgment that you had towards another person, and you finally realize that, you know, they're equal and one to you, and they have weaknesses and strengths, and the strengths you can learn from, and through that you also grow and expand and learn, and it's kind of like an adventure. That's how like yes, you're going to face challenges, but through this process that we're walking, we have the tools to move through those challenges. And that's another point that I say is fundamental within this interview that was discussed, and this process that we're walking about self-depth, is that you have to investigate yourself equally. You have to know yourself. You have to know who you are within your own judgments to be able to see the world differently from your thought patterns and your habitual things in your life that has limited you or is limiting you, like addictions to alcohol or drugs, or judgment addictions, believing that people are bad or good for whatever reasons. All those points are in a way limiting you from embracing that point, learning from it, and then expanding from there. Yeah, this process with Destiny, we are learning how to expand ourselves basically in our living through our own self-discovery, through our own self-investigation of ourselves, so we can recognize that when the judgment does come up, we can recognize it and move beyond it. Because otherwise, if you're not investigating yourself and you're not investigating who you are in that judgment point, you'll just accept it and believe that that's how it is and always has been, because that's how it has always been since you were younger. For me, since I was younger, it's always just been people are this way, people are that way. You learn it from your culture, from your family, your environment, from school, from friends, from all sorts of different social interactions and things like that. So a self-education and a self-understanding of who you are is crucial. And that's one of the main points that we have been walking in. Kim, I just want to ask you if you can share on, like, what is a mind pattern that you've walked in a small scale, like a smaller scaled one, and a larger scaled, and how did you move through that, and what was it like at the end of that when you walk through it? Actually, I'm sorry, just discuss the small scale mind program or thinking pattern that you've been stuck in, and a bigger scale, just to kind of compare and show the audience what that's like.
Okay, so I feel like a small scale one is kind of like the example I gave you, where it's existing in judgment of others and having that limit me from getting to know them. For me, that was an easier one to walk through, so that's why I consider it small. Like, do you want to define small scale?
That's fine. It's just something that, like, just to compare to like what would be like a small scale. Like for me, it would be like being disciplined in my, work, like having to file my papers, say. In a couple of days, I can move through that resistance and just organize myself and get it filed and be disciplined in that point. So it's kind of like what you shared, just like a kind of a smaller, easier type mind program. And then what would be like a bigger one, larger kind of system? What does that look like? How do you experience it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's really different for everybody, because that discipline point would be a big one for me, because that would be, that's what I've been working with. So, and some people, I think.
I was just going to say, everybody has their strengths and weaknesses, and that's different for everybody. So that's like, the process is the same that we walk in terms of the tools and things like that, but the information in the context of what we're each going to walk in this process is all different, because we've all got different experiences and things like that inside of us. So that's a cool distinction.
Okay, so a big one for me was a pattern of victimization. And it's something that I would go into when I felt like I had something to say or something to share. And I would resist that out of fear, because it would be like, it would feel very vulnerable to me to share a perspective or an idea. And for a long time, I mean, I was very quiet. And so I did self-investigation on the point, and I realized that I was exceptionally disempowered when it would come to situations where I would have it in me and I would just want to speak it, but it was fear of others' judgments and, being vulnerable and being hurt, all that kind of stuff. So in order to walk this, and this was a big one for me, this was like a years-long pattern, and the consequence of not walking the point, not pushing it, staying in my comfort zone, was suppression, was frustration and irritation for feeling that I can't voice myself, that I don't have a say in this world, in my environment, just kind of like I'm not even there, And so I walked a process of self-forgiveness where I had to forgive myself, actually, for disempowering myself, for causing all these reactions. I did forgiveness until there was no reactions left in me, and I just felt like I completely understood the point. But that understanding and writing process is a whole other animal when it comes to actually walking the process in reality, where now I find myself in a situation where I want to speak up. All those feelings and reactions, they still exist, it's like, it didn't disappear. I just have the understanding and that stability that I found in my writing, where found my starting point. I found myself. I saw what I was doing. And I made the decision that I would no longer accept and allow myself to live this way. Sure. And when I started speaking up and sharing, you know, what was inside of me, it was terrifying, like jumping off a cliff. You know, it was like taking the plunge literally into the unknown. And you know, at first it's like my voice would be shaky, and of course that would trigger everybody else to like come in and swoop in on me, making jokes or talking over me or just completely disregarding, which was all my worst fears, right? They all came true because I was not stable, but that's just a part of the learning process. I mean, it's almost like you got to walk through this stuff and realize that you still stand even if your worst fears come true. And this is like the amazing part of the process, is that when I experienced those worst fears, I didn't fall into deep depths of depression and wallowing. I was just like, okay, so this is what this feels like. And this is what I've been hearing. And this is why I've been suppressing myself all the time. And with practice, you know, through realizing, okay, it's not the end of the world, you know, I can still exist and survive. Also finding better ways to express myself, my vocabulary, trial and error. I was able to stand completely stable, and the result of having pushed this point, and this like big point for me in walking that process, was actually having an influence on my environment, being able to, in some cases, take a leadership role, pushing through communication with others that allowed me to create an intimacy, whereas before I would have feared that, because you can't develop intimacy in friendships and relationships or anything if you're suppressing your most intimate self. Right. So that expansion of myself, where that stuff that I was suppressing, I didn't even know what it was because I wasn't speaking it. I was just isolating myself, and the interview touches on this as well. You end up isolating yourself, being alone with yourself, and it's almost like yourself and your world and reality become diminished to something very small and comfortable, but small. And it's like, is that really all there is to me? Or, you know, can I be something more? So that's my example of a bigger point system.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, and what you kind of explained in one of the points that is part of this process, like the correction part, is living words. So in a way, some of the words you used was intimacy, and you needed courage to walk through those points of walking into the unknown, basically. You had to face your fear and stand through that experience that always has come up, but within that you were still here, you still walked that, you still stood, and you expanded yourself, because now you've moved beyond your fear. And have you ever moved beyond that fear in the past? Probably not. So yeah, living words is kind of like a term that's always been used and spoken about, but here we're actually practically living these words, like courage. Like you redefine the word. I redefine the word courage to be core gauge, to within myself in those moments of fear that come up, look within and see what is my core, who am I within my core, and I've defined who I am in my core. So I know when I look and I live the word courage, I have references to be able to live that word. So that supports with moving through these points. So you always have, one of the awesome points about this process is you have the basic tools that are going to support you through all these points that are going to come your way and stirring inside yourself. Addictions. For me, one of my huge points was self-judgment, specifically judging the way I looked. So, you know, if this was 2 years, 3 years ago, I wouldn't be able to communicate like I am now. It's just because within myself, I've walked through fears, and I've, you know, did my self-forgiveness, learning why these fears are existing, and through the writing, understanding how to see those fears and find solutions for them. So yeah, the tools are so crucial and so supportive in being able to, you know, expand yourself and live this kind of eternal self-discovery that Jack is talking about. I mean, I can relate it to myself in my own process and how I'm moving within my reality. It is a self-discovery. You're realizing more about who you are, that, you know, if you, like Kim said, limit yourself and stay in your comfort zones, you are gonna not be able to always access those expansion points and those abilities that are here within us, but we just have to understand them and walk the process to be able to have them come through within your expression. You have anything to add to that, Kim?
Yeah, I mean, I had examples of living words. Like I was in a social situation feeling shy, and I decided to live the word open. And for me, I defined it as opening the door and just letting myself as I am through that door when I enter a group of people. It's like it should be as comfortable as opening the door to my house and walking in. Who am I in that situation? So openness was a word that I chose to live. And you know, it just provides that kind of blueprint of what do I accept and allow myself to be right now and what do I not. And so I decided I no longer was going to live that shyness and was going to instead live openness. And that's what I was able to do. It really supported me in social situations.
It's also like living words is also in a way like it is like a blueprint, because usually like our ways we live is usually detrimental and wanting to stay in our comfort zones. So if you work with words that you want to live, like if you see a point in your life that you want to expand within and grow from, you can just find words like Kim says, openness. I want to live more open, and then you can work with that word and kind of look at the definition in the dictionary, see what openness means. So you actually see, I mean, there's so many words where I look in the definition, I'm like amazed at, you know, I don't know so many words. So even learning words and what they mean is like an expansion point. It's so cool. So yeah, you can use the dictionary and you can use your own self-creation points within yourself to learn how to live words and like what can you do to be more open in a situation. Kim's walking her process with that word. I'm walking my process, so it may be different, but you know, you could always do blogs and share about it, and you know, show other people how to live that, because the end result of that is becoming more open, becoming more able to integrate with your environment, and through that, who are you going to be? The word best you could live. So yeah, we align it a lot to the life principle of life, so everybody is supported, and we create an environment in a world that is in support of all beings, because obviously we realize that each one is a life being, and also that's the principles that we walk in this process and through EQAFE, which creates an eternal world that we all want to live in. So it's kind of how we walk that point. Kim, let's go to another question. What have been some challenges in living words and kind of walking this path of self-discovery that you've been walking through, using these tools of self-forgiveness and self-change and living words, redefinition, and things like that?
Okay, so I'll talk about discipline because I brought it up already. And that's been an extremely difficult point for me. And actually, as I've been writing it out, it's been like all these threads that would led to other points. And it turned out to be like a big knot of individual points coming together to make this like a difficult challenge for me. And what's interesting is that when I was pushing the word discipline, I found that as I was doing the work that I was disciplining myself to do, I would get pains in my back. It was like the work was this burden and this toil. And I was like, no, but I must push it because I must be disciplined. And it just wasn't working. My body's feedback was like telling me, no, you're not doing this properly. And so I had to, in order to be able to live the word discipline, I had to look at all the other things that were affecting my ability to be disciplined. So I'll just name one for an example, which was procrastination. And when I investigated, okay, so why am I procrastinating? Because I just kind of labeled myself as someone who procrastinates. And it was actually pointed out to me recently that I don't do that hardly anymore. And I was like, whoa, you know, like, wow, I didn't even realize that, you know, I have been changing.
Yeah, that's another way to know that you're changing, is when your reality starts to respond and show you that you are actually changing yourself. So you'll see it in your reality. As you change, your reality will change too, and people will respond to you differently. And you'll see little things that kind of show, okay, look, there I am changing. And you see kind of how the expansion process grows from there. So that's a cool point. Go ahead, Kim. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut.
That's cool. Yeah, because you don't want to get lost also in the process. You want to keep it about life and living. And, you know, when you even explain the EQAFE, well, like you explain the points of beings, and it sounds like a little bit kind of out there, but what we're talking about in terms of how we live it is actually very practical. It's just normal life stuff.
Yeah.
So back to my point, which was looking at the word procrastination. And what I found was when I lived the word procrastination, my experience was one of peace, one of calm, one of having a break for myself. And that was, so I was able to drop the judgment about me being a procrastinator, because I saw like, okay, this is just like basically a misguided attempt to give myself a break in life, because I am trying, my definition of the word discipline needed to be adjusted because I was overdoing it. So the redefining and living words process is really like a give and take, trial and error, you know, test it out kind of thing. So once I was able to see why I was procrastinating, what it was I was trying to give myself, I decided to, I mean, that helped me to see that I was pushing myself too much, too hard, trying to do way more than I was capable. So I toned down. It's like I found I was living a polarity, and I slowly created the equilibrium where I toned way down on the work, and, you know, and not doing a lot, but giving myself lots of breaks. But it was cool in that I wasn't being as productive as I could have been, but I experienced like, okay, I can actually play with this balance, you know, I can be the director here and not have to be a slave to the idea that to be disciplined is a struggle, a burden, and a toil. So I lived this kind of like easy existence for a while and really came back down to earth. And slowly but surely, as I applied the word discipline, I was able to structure my day in such a way that was balanced, because I had to include the word balance into discipline, and structure and flexibility and flow. And, you know, it's like with living words, oftentimes it's not just one word, but it becomes kind of like a cluster or a pairing where one word is complemented best by a couple other words. So yeah, that's why discipline was the challenge for me. I mean, it still rears its ugly head every once in a while, where the procrastination comes and I see like, oh, I've fallen back into my old ways, you know, remind myself of my redefinition of the living word discipline, and just kind of, you know, it gets easier and easier to bring yourself back to that living definition.
Yeah, totally. Very cool point. Yeah, I mean, that's an awesome example, and you're right. It's like one word, you have a couple words that complement it, I would say, as well. So yeah, it's like a supportive kind of platform you can use to move yourself through the challenges that you're going to face. One of the points that has always kind of been said in the material of destiny and EQAFE and things like that is, well, actually Bernard used to say it. It was that when you face a challenge, that it's just your mind self coming through and, you know, show, like, you have to again prove and like stand within yourself and, you know, reinitiate who you are in this reality to show that you are actually genuine and for real, and what you want to create is actually what you're doing. So it's a like, because this point is very, it's fun and it's enjoyable, but it's also kind of like a serious point because of the way the world is existing and the situation in this world for, you know, humans, animals, the environment, how we're destroying the environment. So, you know, what we're walking is self-discovery, but it's also a process to change ourselves so we can stand and become examples for others in our environment, our, you know, environment, day-to-day environment. And, you know, as you expand and you become more vocal or whatever you want to do, you expand in your example. So yeah, expansion is quite part of this process, and it's also a point to expand yourself so you can support others, because we do need to change, and this world does need to change in its way it's operating. So yeah, I mean, that was an awesome example, Kim. Thanks for sharing that, sharing your example on living the word discipline. I can relate to it in my own, you know, walk that I walk with living words. One of the examples I was thinking of when you were talking about that is, one of the challenge words for me is patience. And I'm walking it actually in exercise, because I've always been athletic and I've always kind of challenged the feelings of ego that can come through, like being better than other people and things like that. That's always been strong in me. So to be patient now and exercise is like, instead of like I'm doing it on the treadmill. So instead of running like full steam at, like, you know, trying to run like a 8-minute mile or something, I'm slowing it way down. So I'm running like a 13-14-minute mile, which is like almost walking, but it's like very, very slow. But actually my body has responded so much better to just slowing down and just kind of enjoying the run, instead of trying to, you know, push myself and push my body to its limits and actually end up hurting my body. So yeah, it's just like kind of a different way of seeing yourself, and through that you expand, and it's all about self-expansion, but bringing it back down to reality and finding the common sense to make it so everybody can live it and we all can live in support of ourselves and one another in this reality and the environment, nature, and things like that. So that's my sharing. Kim, do you have any last words? Any conclusion points? Anything that you want to discuss?
Yeah, I do. Just that, like the atom, like all these points are interconnected, in that you share an example about exercise, and that may seem like a small thing that's just personal to you and your life, and what does that have to do with anything else? But the thing is that what you're doing is developing a structure of how you're getting to know yourself and how you work with yourself, so that you can then use that structure for many, many other points in your life. And imagine we're doing that with everything. I mean, we've existed in such a limited way that the stuff, I mean, we are covering a very broad range of topics here. So the exercise point being one that shows that that's a skill that you now have that you can apply to excel at work, to excel in relationships, you can apply it anywhere now.
Yeah.
And keeping in mind that everything that you're doing is based on the principle of considering everybody as yourself. And so if you want the best for everybody, you first have to create the best for yourself so that you can stand as that example, like you were talking about. And then with the point, some of the points that I brought up earlier with judging people and not spending time or getting to know certain specific people based on very superficial judgments. I mean, you know, I'm pushing this point now, and then I'm in another country now, and I'm able to take what I walked back there in like a school environment and get to know people in another country without judging them for their culture, their country, you know, having that kind of these blind spots in a worldview, but instead understanding their politics and who they are. I mean, South Africa is very, there's like a heightened state right now of racism because of certain political situations that I won't get into. But to be able to look at both sides and understand and imagine that, you know, when or if everybody is able to take a step back and objectively look at everybody in the world and realize that we're all a result of our environment in one way or another, and that if I was born somewhere else, you know, I would have probably the same issues or whatever that I may judge if I wasn't born there. And so it's these seemingly small points are actually gigantic, you know, universal points that if we can master them on a small level, on a small scale, and then as we go on living, expand and grow and take on bigger and bigger points and issues and problems and obstacles, then, you know, with if you think about the accumulative effect, you know, the 1 + 1, like I'm doing it, now you're doing it, and standing as an example for others to then do it, that is world changing. So something as small as going slow on the treadmill does relate to what you're putting out there in the world, and thus what kind of place the world is as a result of your participation.
Totally. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that through. That's a very cool example. Because you're right, it's like a ripple effect. So as I become more patient within this small little exercise that I'm doing with the treadmill, which is difficult. It's like a challenge point, but it's like an easy one to walk through. So like you said, start small, something that you can do day to day that, you know, on the treadmill or wherever. Then you can bring it into your work environment and I become more patient with what I'm doing on the computer, who I'm speaking to, and how I interact with different people. I become more patient because I've already practiced that kind of new way of living through that exercise point. So now I can use what I've learned in that exercise point to bring into my work. And then through that, I'm now influencing people around me so that they learn how to be, say they're impatient like me and they haven't really worked with it, they can maybe learn something from me as I'm now standing as that example, and then they go into their life and start living patience, and then they share, and then it ripples out. So that's like a very cool point you brought through. It's a ripple effect, and that's how we can create change in this world, just in small moments within yourself and just living that consistently. So yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, and even just one last thing is that people can tend to judge even that by saying, you know, kind of, who do you think you are that you can change the world or have any kind of influence or effect on the world? That is just the same programming that we're talking about here, where it's like, yeah, actually, I choose to not believe that I'm so limited, you know, that I can't have an impact. That's actually just another limitation and a self-definition. Why don't we all just, you know, entertain the idea that we are all participants here equally, and that we all can expand beyond these limitations, and, you know, it's not something that'll happen tomorrow, or, you know, even maybe not in our lifetime. But the fact that we are realizing this now, that, hey, you know, let's drop our self-limitation and let's become the utmost that we could possibly be, and just spend a lifetime discovering what that even is. Why not? Why wouldn't you do that? You know, like, why would you choose anything but that.
Yeah.
So that's just the last point I wanted to add.
Cool. And I'm just going to add one last point, and it's going back to what this interview is about, and the material and things that we've learned from. I mean, I didn't know any of this when I first started looking at the audios and things like that. You have to educate yourself, and within that, expand yourself. I mean, it's all a self process. There's always support. I mean, these resources, EQAFE.com and the Destiny is support. But you yourself have to make that commitment and walk it. No one can do that for you. So it's all who you are within yourself. And obviously what we're sharing, to be the best you can be and walk that and create in yourself a little point of example and change and a ripple effect out, that in the end you're going to look back and be like, oh, I'm so grateful to myself that I walked that process. I did it, and I expanded myself, and I look at what I've created around me. So it does have an effect, and it does have a point of self-gratification through walking something that you said you were going to do, and then you start living it, and you see within yourself that you can do it, and then you just keep going from there. And that's where that discovery point is. But these sources, EQAFE.com, Destiny I Process, and the tools that are shared through that is exceptional in supporting you to be able to walk your highest potential, your utmost. And please go visit it and explore it. It's awesome. And if you have any questions, you can leave it on this Hangout, and we'll definitely start a conversation. It'll be very cool. So thanks for watching. Kim, thanks so much for sharing, being here on the Hangout. It was awesome having you here. Really enjoyed the chat.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Enjoy where you're at, and enjoy, everybody. Have a good afternoon, good night, or good morning, and see you next time.
Bye.